Welcome. Thanks for joining us tonight for the Zero Emissions Vehicle Subsidy Information Session. My name is Mel and I am a Sustainability Officer at Yarra Council. Yarra City Council acknowledges the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people as the traditional owners and true sovereigns of the land now known as Yarra. We also acknowledge the significant contributions made by other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to the life in Yarra. And we pay our respects to elders from all nations, past, present, and future. Before we begin tonight, just a bit about using Zoom. We're recording tonight's session, so your microphone and video are turned off, and we'll have time for questions after we hear from our presenters. So you can post your questions in the Q&A section, and we'll read them out to be answered during the Q&A time. When you see links on your screen, these will be emailed to you at the end of the session so that you can have them for easy reference later. And we'll also try to share them in the chat as we go along. So we're really excited to share with you tonight information about the Victorian government's zero emissions vehicle subsidy and what you can expect from owning and driving an electric vehicle. Tonight, we're going to hear from Kat O'Brien, Program Operations Manager of the Zero Emissions Vehicle Subsidy at Solar Victoria, and Bryce Gatton from EV Choice. So I'll give you a brief overview of what Yarra Council is doing in this space before we introduce our speakers. We're transitioning our operations, including our fleet, to all electric. And Council's electricity needs are already powered by 100% renewable electricity. And we have 70 electric and hybrid vehicles and bicycles in the Council fleet, including the first Australian engineered electric tipper truck. And we're now working to switch the heating, hot water, and gas at 20 of our community use buildings, which include childcare facilities, senior centers, and other community facilities. So we're also working with the community to support residents and businesses to switch to all electric homes powered by renewable energy, and this includes the switch to EVs. We're supporting the community to install solar and switch to all electric homes and take climate action with our 100% renewable Yarra campaign. And as part of this, we ran a series of events called Let's Electrify Yarra earlier this year, focusing on the why and how of creating an all-electric home powered by renewable energy. So you'll see a bit about this on the screen at the moment. If you haven't watched those, you can watch the event recordings at yarracity.vic.gov.au/all-electric-home. And tonight we'll hear about the next part of creating an all-electric home, electric vehicles. And of course, for local trips, a bike or electric bike is a great choice, and there are lots of public transport options locally in Yarra. And for those who drive, and the times when you do drive, tonight's talk is about electric vehicles and the Victorian government support that's available to get you switching to an EV sooner. We've installed 2 new fast charging stations for public use at Collingwood Library, and 4 more chargers will be installed in council off-street car parks in Fitzroy and Richmond in late 2022. Council's also supporting the installation of several more public use EV chargers by other providers in Yarra in the next year, 2023. Right now, Sam, sorry, could you go to the next slide, please? Right now, we have a limited number of free 30-minute phone energy consults available with the energy experts at Renew, which you can access if you live in Yarra or metropolitan Melbourne. Contact the Yarra Energy Foundation if you'd like to book one in. If you have installed solar, switched any of your appliances to electric, or considered switching to solar or electric appliances, we'd love to hear your experience to help shape our future programs. So you can complete our solar-powered electric home survey. If you complete the survey by Sunday, the 13th of November, you can go in the draw to win one of 2 $100 vouchers to Street, which is a local social enterprise cafe. And you can also stay informed about our future events and programs by signing up to the Yarra Environment News. And so now I'd like to introduce Kat O'Brien. Kat O'Brien is Program Operations Manager of the Zero Emissions Vehicle Subsidy at Solar Victoria. Solar Victoria is responsible for the delivery of the Victorian Government's Solar Homes Programme, which includes the Zero Emissions Vehicle Subsidy. The Solar Homes Programme is a key initiative in the Victorian Government's commitment to reduce energy costs, boost energy supply, create new jobs in the renewable sector, and tackle climate change. Thanks for joining us, Kat.
Thank you, Mel. I'll just pull up my screen. And just my apologies in advance, I haven't been able to get my video to work. Is that coming through for you?
Yep, we can see that.
Thank you. And thanks again for having Solar Victoria and the ZEV program here today at the session. Thanks for everyone who's come out tonight to listen to the presentation. I too just would like to acknowledge the lands of the Wurundjeri people and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands of which you'll join us on today. Pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I've been at Solar Victoria for about 2.5 years now, originally with the Solar for Community Housing program and recently in with the Zero Emissions Vehicle Subsidy program. So have a little bit of awareness too of the other programs that Solar Victoria offers relating to solar PV, batteries and home heating and cooling initiatives to help with the renewable energy transition. So today I'm mainly going to focus obviously on the Zero Emissions Vehicle program and talk about eligibility and how the program works. So the Zero Emissions Vehicle program is part of the ZEV roadmap. There's a range of initiatives that the Victorian Government has established to try and meet its net zero emissions target by 2050, to have 50% of all new light vehicle sales to be ZEV by 2030. As part of the initiatives, obviously the Zero Emissions Vehicle Subsidy program comes out of that, as well as a range of other initiatives to support infrastructure, electric buses, the fleets for government vehicles and industry support packages. The Zero Emissions Vehicle program supports both individuals and businesses with a upfront discount on the purchase of a new ZEV. As part of that program, we've now supported more than 6,200 subsidies since its initial launch in July 2021. To be eligible for the program, you need to be a Victorian individual, and individuals can receive up to one subsidy, and a business applicant will need to have a registered office in the state of Victoria and is eligible for up to 2 subsidies. There are government entities and also licensed motor car traders aren't eligible as part of the program. As part of the requirements, the vehicle itself needs to be fully zero emissions vehicle, so hybrids are not included in the program. They need to be a passenger vehicle, and there's also price caps involved with the program. We can include demonstration vehicles, second-hand. I just got that. The vehicle does need to be registered and ordered and registered within a 6-month period. I will note, however, we are aware that there's been significant global supply delays in the market and have since extended those time limits to 10 months. And also a requirement to be part of the program is that the purchase needs to be through a participating ZEV trader. So the initial launch of the program did see phase 1, as we called it, where the customers were reimbursed for their purchase. That period only lasted a couple of months. And since mid-November 2021, we've moved to what we sort of call a point of sale model, where the car trader themselves will apply the upfront discount to the purchase. So car traders have access to a portal where they put in an application with us on your behalf for that subsidy to be applied for the vehicle. So we have about 90 traders participating with us at the moment, and we do have a website dedicated to finding the traders who are currently participating with us. So just a little bit of information that you would potentially expect to see when you're potentially going and inquiring with vehicle dealers and seeking an application with us. Basically, the car dealer will need to have some information on you, such as your driver's license and ABN, for processing your application. Car dealers will provide you our privacy collection statement, which outlines, how we use your information for the purposes of administering the subsidy. And you'll also get contacted by Solar Victoria when you first, when the dealer puts in your application, and also at the end of the process too, where you'll be, notified as confirmation about the application. And we'll also potentially contact you further along the journey just to check in on how it's all been going and your experience in the program. So as I said, sort of more than 6,200 subsidies have been allocated to date. Most of those are to individual purchases, less so to business customers. And we're seeing at the moment the average purchase price for vehicles in our program is around the $62,000 mark. We do see the highest sort of areas of uptake in those sort of western and also eastern parts of Melbourne, such as Wyndham and Monash and Casey over in the east. There's a pretty big spread, obviously, across metropolitan Melbourne, and there's, to a lesser degree, there are regional areas, but we are sort of seeing those areas such as Greater Geelong with pretty strong areas of uptake. Yarra Council itself, obviously, it's a smaller area with its own profile, probably comes a little bit further down the list. So the brands that are currently participating in the program, I probably don't need to read through all those, but there's a number of different models within the brands that are eligible. Obviously, the price point is the limitation for some of the brands, where they might have a range of models that are over our cap, but there are a number of models that are falling within the price cap. So the program itself has got a range of materials on our website, in addition to the subsidy itself, such as the 101 guide, a number of fact sheets and links and resources across to other areas and across the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning. So there's a number of resources there for people to have access to. So I'll probably stop there, Mel.
Thanks very much, Kat.
Yeah,
that's fantastic. It's great to hear all about the subsidy, and it's great that it exists. It's fantastic to hear that you've had that much take up of it, and that and there's so much information on the Solar Victoria website for people to find out more about the subsidy. And we'll also have time for questions at the end, of course. So please feel free to pop your questions in the Q&A as we go along. And I'll now introduce our next speaker, Bryce Gatton. So Bryce has been working in writing and presenting on the EV sector since 2008. He currently writes for Australian EV news website, thedriven.io, runs the EV transition support consultancy EV Choice, and does EV build safety training for a number of university EV race teams, including Melbourne University's MUR team. He is also the writer behind the electric vehicle model fact sheets and excuse me, and a webpage found on the AEVA, the Australian Electric Vehicle Association's national website. Thanks so much for joining us, Bryce.
Thank you, Mel, and welcome to people here tonight. I'm hoping I can answer a few questions through the presentation, and then we'll take some more questions, obviously, at the end and try and answer a few more at that time. I'll try not to go too fast, although there's a fair bit of information and a fairly limited time. So I will scoot through. If make any questions or pop them in the Q&A on the way through. I shall now pop up my share of screen and double check. Can everyone see that? Everyone happy to see that one?
Yep, we can see that, Bryce. Thanks.
Fantastic. No worries. My talk today will be pretty much about electric vehicles and is it worth making the switch, or when it might be worth making the switch. First up, I'll get this going. little bit of terminology, because we are rather hopeless when it comes to EVs and people working in the area. We keep using all these jargon terms, so I may as well explain the acronyms before I start, in case I start using them by accident on you. On your, let me see, it's a screen, so it's on your left the same as it's on my left. You'll be seeing the PEV, or the plug-in electric vehicles. The simplest of those is the plug-in battery electric vehicle, the BEV, and you'll see that one's quite a straightforward thing. It's got electric motor, it has a sizable battery, and it uses that electric motor to drive the car, and as you slow down, it turns the motor into a generator to save some of the energy and also stop wearing the brakes, because it's using the energy to slow you down, or the motor to slow you down rather than your braking system, and that energy goes back into the battery, and you save between about 5 and 15% of the energy in the car or energy in the battery by doing that. The next one across is your plug-in hybrid, and that has a slightly smaller battery, and they've been pretty much an interim technology, so to speak, because the battery is smaller and the battery has been the biggest cost item in a BEV or BEV. Therefore, they have been a cheaper option, although the BEVs now are getting cheaper as the battery prices come down. So the plug-in hybrids are finding less and less of a market overseas, where they're more mature electric vehicle markets. So that's got both a petrol pump and a 3-pin plug to recharge. The next one across is your hybrid electric vehicle. That's the early ones that we saw, the Prius, the Camry, those types of vehicles. They don't have a plug to plug in, and in fact, if you run out of petrol, they stop. I'll talk a little bit about the coming bans overseas on the sales of new internal combustion engine vehicles, or ICE cars. The HEV is included, so they will fall over at that hurdle. The 2 PEVs, the plug-in vehicles, will make it over the hurdle. The fourth one there, and I used to have only 4, is the fuel cell electric vehicle, otherwise known as the hydrogen car. And that still is an electric car, but it uses a hydrogen tank, converts hydrogen through a chemical reaction into water and a few other byproducts, all quite harmless. And that creates electricity and then drives the electric motor. However, you still need a battery, because the hydrogen fuel cell doesn't like speeding up and slowing down, so the battery provides the oomph for speeding up and also soaks up the regenerative braking, because you can't regenerate hydrogen from the water byproducts once it's been happened. And that used to be the 4, and up until recently, that was the 4 types of EVs that existed in the world. And then horizontal electric trucks came along, and we haven't even come up with a proper name for it yet, so I call it the plug-in fuel cell electric vehicle. You can see it as a hydrogen pump and a 3-pin plug, and they're experimenting with big trucks. They're an international company. They've started building trucks here as well, and the idea is electric battery will be used around town, and then the hydrogen tank and the fuel cell providing electricity will happen, the Melbourne to Sydney, Brisbane type runs. We'll see how they go. I know a number of other manufacturers have given up. All the fuel cell passenger vehicle manufacturers, apart from Hyundai and a little bit of Honda, have given up actually even trying to build hydrogen fuel cell cars, passenger vehicles anymore. That's the future for them, as far as they're concerned, is electric. I'll talk a little more about that in a moment. A little reminder, electric vehicles didn't just happen overnight. They're not something that's been around as a little flash in the pan. They've been around since the dawn of the automotive era. In fact, somewhere around the turn of last century, in very rough numbers, 1/3 of all cars were petrol, 1/3 of all cars were external combustion or steam, and roughly 1/3 of them were electric. And it was purely because petrol could be taken anywhere in 2-gallon drums, and you could drive your petrol car anywhere in the countryside, whereas an electric car was pretty much restricted to the few CBDs in the world, the biggest cities that had electricity. We forget how little time electricity's been around. 100 years ago, it was not everywhere. And that's how the electric car didn't quite make it the first time around. And the technology has been quietly bubbling along since and evolving to some really good stuff that's happening now. Mind you, I keep talking about, and the stuff we're talking about tonight is about cars, but it's not just cars that are transforming to electrics, EV. Trucks are turning to that, and those are both available now. The Tesla truck will be starting deliveries in about 4 weeks' time. Bobcat actually announced and showed a full electric Bobcat January this year. Who hasn't tried to be run over by an electric delivery bicycle somewhere in Melbourne? They are everywhere. Motorbikes, yes, even Harley Davidson are now building an electric motorbike. It's called the Livewire, and there's one I often see around the DC fast charger at the Swinburne DC fast charger in Hawthorne. Yes, electric planes are available. There is a fleet of them for flight training here in Australia even. And in Norway, they say with the bans coming up, by 2040, they want all short-haul flights to be electric. And then there's experimentation with autonomous forms of flying taxis. This is a one-person, one-pilot thing called the Black Fly. It's vertical takeoff and landing. They have visions of that becoming an automatic taxi like the Jetsons. It's available for sale in the US now, but not as an autonomous form. That little car down the bottom corner is actually built here in Victoria, in Croydon. It's overseas at the moment being tested. It is long-term also expected to become an autonomous thing without pedals and steering wheel. At the moment, it's a small, low-speed thing to do what they call the last mile type stuff. But ultimately, you'll be able to order it. It'll turn up and just pick you up. You don't have to touch the pedals and steering wheel because they're not there. And it'll drop you off after you've picked you up from the bus stop or whatever. Yes, buses are a big thing overseas, and we're starting to trial them here in Victoria. Yes, even ferries. That's a big 30-car, I think, 300-passenger ferry that does a regular run up around the Scandinavian countries. They save something like 80% in fuel costs, no noise, no smoke. People really love them. And they are being, basically, there's dozens of orders for them, for more of them now. And the councils are, in fact, picking up electric lawnmowers and things. That particular one will do basically mow all day and will recharge on a PowerPoint overnight. This is my sort of shamefully swiped slide from just about every other person that does EV talks, talking about how fast a transition can happen. And when you look back in history, they seem really fast. Now, 13 years have passed between these two photos. One horseless carriage, one petrol car in that left-hand photo in April 1900. And Easter, 13 years later, there's one. You can just see the tail of a horse in that picture there. And that's how fast they can. That's an affluent area, by the way, so they change fairly quickly as the transition moved around into more poorer urban or rural regions. It might have been the 40s, even into the 50s, but the transition finally occurred there. But they do happen, and happen looking back quite quickly. Although at the moment it feels really slow. I've been around EV since 2008, and it seems really slow in the middle of it. This is, by the way, the typical transition curve for any technology. You'll see, tablet, computer, smartphones, computer even, home air conditioning, all of them take off slowly, ramp up as they get taken up by all the general public. So you have your early adopters, and then your early majority, and then your late majority, and then sort of the last people finally get on board. And that's a fairly typical curve. And does that curve look vaguely familiar? That's the start of the EV transition curve globally, where that was reached 9% by 2021, and we're going to be probably 12% this year. Australia is lower down on that curve, but looking 2020, it was 0.6% of new car sales. Last year, it was a bit under 2%. This year, we're looking at being maybe a little under 4%. So we're taking off in the same trajectory. So the transition is happening. More acronyms: EVSE, or electric supply equipment, electric vehicle supply equipment, otherwise known as a car charger. I won't go into why some of them shouldn't be called chargers, but yes, it's a technical point. Those four on your left, the top left one is in fact the sort of thing that comes with the car. All cars come with a trickle charger. You can plug them. I'll talk a bit about speed and charging in a moment, but they are what I call a trickle charger. They're basically like a little jerry can in the boot, and they'll trickle charge you at about 12 kilometres charge now and get you back to a PowerPoint or a larger charger, as I'll talk about on the next slide. The one below it is one I use when I'm travelling, say Melbourne to Perth or Melbourne to Canberra. I actually don't really need it Melbourne to Canberra anymore, but Melbourne to Perth, it was very handy. And that I can actually set the charging rates up to the maximum of whatever car I'm driving at the time. The middle one is the sort of thing that is put around publicly. This is all still running on household power supplies. And in fact, that AC power to DC conversion, like for the DC battery wants to be charged at DC, is done inside the car. So the limiting factor on how fast it can charge is in fact related to the internals size of the car charger that's built into the car. It's sort of why I say these lot aren't really chargers. They're just automatic power points that talk to the car and turn the lead on when the car's charging and turn the lead off to keep it safe. So if anybody damages it when the car's not charging, you won't get zapped. And that one on the middle there, in the middle, is what I call a tethered lead, a typical Tesla one, but all EVSEs can be bought like that. I always say for home use, a tethered lead is best because you can just unplug it, roll it up, and then plug it back in. You'd have to try and find somewhere to put the lead and unplug it from the charger in the middle. When you go into council chargers and things like that, that one in the middle is quite useful because you have your own lead and you know it's in perfectly good condition. And the councils like it because they don't have to look after the lead, which, like the tyre pressure lines at fuel stations, are always getting damaged because they're sort of thing that gets driven over or left behind or lying around. The two on your right are in fact DC fast chargers. These are true chargers because they actually do the AC to DC transformation inside that box, and they feed DC current directly to the battery. And they will charge at very high speeds, very, very much higher power than a house. That orange one, which is about 50 kilowatts charging, the others which could charge at about a maximum around 7, depending on the car. Pardon me. That one would take 6 household supplies just for the 51. The one on the far right is 350. So you can do the maths of another 7 times 6 household supplies. So they are the sort of thing that you would find at a roadhouse or at the side of a road on the highway. Pardon me. So the key point I'm trying to make is the refueling paradigm is different. When you get over this change, it's amazing the difference. Think of it as a mobile phone model now. You just plug it in and ignore it. You go away, do your thing, and the car does its thing. It's not, find, stop, and act as a fuel pump attendant. You have to go out of your way during your trip to charge. Your destination is now your charging point. This is the slide I was talking about for how fast you can charge, and this is basically your choice. If you're charging overnight, I'll talk on the next slide, but you get about, on a power point, about 12 kilometres charge an hour, right up to those super fast chargers. You'll get up to 2,100 kilometres charged in a full hour. So you'll be fully charged in 10 minutes. For the cars to do that aren't quite there yet. At the moment, the fastest will do it in 18 minutes. My Kona does it in about roughly an hour because it's an older technology. I have an electric Kona, by the way, if people hadn't realised that by now. Key question with that paradigm shift is how fast do you actually need to charge? If you're doing less than 100 kilometres in a day, a power point is good enough, especially if you're going to a B&B or something for the night or away for the weekend. Plugging into one of those will do the job nicely. As I said, give it 100, 150 Ks recharge in the night. If what you're doing less than that in the day, that's really all you need. $500 up install because it has to be taken back to the switchboard. That doesn't pass by any other power points like a normal power circuit. By the way, I always say don't rely on a power point as your main home charging method. Power points were never really built to take high currents for long times. That's the sort of thing that can happen. That was a failed 15 amp plug plugged into a 15 amp outlet, and that was the extension lead he rather foolishly used. You shouldn't really use extension leads, and that's the reason why. You can see how melted and damaged that got. If you're going to be using it as your primary source and doing lots of kilometres all the time, I always suggest putting in a proper charger. It's a far more pleasant experience, and that'll get me fully charged overnight quite comfortably, 450 Ks plus as a full recharge. It's about 9 hours, and they're about 1,500 up for the basics installed and a basic installation. Will an EV go the distance is often a question I get asked. One point to make is the early days. Are we early days still? We may or may not be. I'll talk about that in a moment. It was 25 years after the first internal combustion engine vehicles, the petrol pump appeared. Before that, 2-gallon tins, and that's how the petrol car won. You could take 2-gallon tins anywhere. You couldn't take an electricity supply without a very long lead. These days, I'd say we're a bit further ahead than maybe the first 25 years of a petrol car. Those orange dots, I've taken that from a program or an app called plugshare.com, filtered it for just DC fast chargers. So this is the DC fast charging network as it exists at the moment. As you'll notice, there's not a lot, in fact, nothing between Adelaide and 200 Ks west of the border in WA, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But if you're going right up the east coast, there's chargers all the way. The NRMA has this beautiful network all through the outback of New South Wales. There is a plan. I was trying to find a picture of it with a whole lot of extra dots for the planned chargers coming in the next 12 to 18 months. That gap in the Nullarbor Plains being filled, WA right up the coast up to Darwin's being filled. The charging network is rolling out very fast now. So yes, you can drive across the Nullarbor Plain. I did that a couple of months ago when I was going over there to do some or run some electric vehicle safety training for the Forming SA race teams over there, the uni teams. But you do have a couple of stops on the way for a bit of a slow charge. My car has a maximum of 7 kilowatts or 32 amps single phase on its AC charger that's built into it. So I had to sit there for 3 hours to get enough charge to do the Ceduna to Port Augusta hop. If I had a 11 kilowatt charger built in, that would have been 2 hours. If I had a 22 kilowatt charger built in, it would have been 1 hour. And the cars are coming out with 11 and they're working their way up at 22. So if you do get caught out where there's no DC fast charger, you can get quite fast speeds on an AC one if you choose one that's got a faster charger built in. The future, well, 80–90% of charging is done at your place of residence. Much of the rest of it is done at your workplace or your other destination. You have your community DC fast chargers. That one's down at the Cape in Cape Patterson here in Victoria. You have the Tesla closed network. They will be opening up their network like any other public subscription network. The NRMA, I love the NRMA. They have this beautiful network all through New South Wales. It is free to use. Sooner or later, they're going to start charging for it. But at the moment, you can drive all around New South Wales for free. And then there's the ChargeFox network and the EV network that basically fill out like a normal highway petrol station. And that's one at Barnawartha North, just south of the border here in Victoria. I often get asked the question, how far can you go on an EV? Well, they're a lot further than my original Leaf, which was about 120k. Then now my Hyundai Kona will do one of those three numbers, and I'll explain why there's three numbers in a moment. In Australia, we're still using the old NEDC, which is the old European standard, commonly around 30% too high, and that's to do with our fuel efficiency, fuel economy standards haven't been updated for a very long time. And our fuel quality is still around Euro 5D, or Euro 5, I should say, and in Europe, they're up to 6D. It's another story which I'm leaving out tonight. WLTP, however, is the new European standard, and it's pretty close. If you're driving around city to middle to outer suburban use, I will comfortably get that 484 number on the WLTP on my Kona. I've been shown on my range estimator, and the range estimators are quite good in the Kona, up to 526, and I've gone more than 500 on the charge around town if I'm just beetling around. The US EPA number, if you're doing middle, outer suburban, some regional driving, that's a better number, and I find driving around regional Victoria from around 420 is a good number. Fully loaded, driving to Perth, I was probably hopping around 390, but that was at 100k, no regen braking because the nullarbor, it's dead straight and you don't slow down. So yeah, you lose a bit there, but again, if you've got fast charges coming up like in Tassie, maximum, in fact, 70 to 80 kilometres apart, you can skip 3 or 4 charges, DC charges in Tassie, and that's what the rest of Australia is working towards, that sort of number. So you can skip 3 or 4 before you even needed to stop. If you want more detail on that, so those of you who subscribe to Renew magazine, edition 155, I wrote an article and I popped it up on my own website, EV Choice. Does it cost to run an EV? Well, I'll just throw up the numbers. For 10,000 Ks, you'll save about $900 odd fuel versus electricity, saving a bit in the service savings. Victoria, we have the road user charge. I must add there that I've no opposition to the road user charge, but they did rush it in rather rapidly and they have somewhat bungled the rollout of it. So those of you who might have an EV here tonight, check your bills because they are commonly wrong, and don't take no for an answer when you point it out. I had to go a fair way before they got mine corrected. So you're saving maybe $900 per 10,000 kilometres. Around the world, well, there's bucket loads of models, hundreds. Australia, not so many. In fact, when I started doing these sorts of presentations on what to buy in about 2016, 17, we had about 9. Even a year ago, we only had 16. We're now up to 33. So I don't list them all anymore. I refer people to the AEVA website, aeva.asn.au. And then I have a list there that I write and I update monthly of a summary sheet. And if you click on the image there, you'll get this sheet. And that will give you the WLTP range, whether it has a number of features, what is class size, charging rates, AC and DC towing rate, and it's on the road price. And that's just taken straight from carsales.com.au. So on the roads, that is an actual on the road price, not the list price, sticker price that they often trick us with sometimes, I should say, I could say. And if you click on the image of a car there, you'll get these. I do a 2-page fact sheet with the basic details of all these cars, and they are exactly the same format right through, so you can do a direct comparison. Ditto for the second-hand ones. When a car stops being sold here and there's only second-hand ones for sale, I change it over to a second-hand sheet and things to look for when you're buying a second-hand one. Next year, we're going to see a lot of new cars coming here, even to Australia. If you're looking for the bargain of the year, I suspect the MG4 will be that. If you're looking for some really interesting, more technical cars, the Megane E-Tech or the Cupra Born, which is basically the VW in a wolf's clothing, because it's a sporty version, will both be here soon. And they could be really interesting cars too. But there's a number coming. Key, though, is I think next year is going to be the commercial vehicle year. And these are the things coming. We will see the LDV ET60 Ute arrive late, probably next month, actually. And those others will be turning up soon thereafter. Buying second-hand, many options. Well, not quite so many, but there are a number. But there are few in numbers. We haven't had a lot of cars sold here. Remember, 2/3 of an EV is still a car. All your normal checks, steering, suspension, tyres, seats, 12 volts electrics, horn, all that sort of stuff still needs checking. You just need to check the battery and drive functions, and there are apps you can do. Get on your phone and you plug in what's called an OBD2 onboard diagnostic dongle that will plug into all cars, have a OBD2 port, and you can get more data. And a number of brands already have people who have written up a app to check out some more details that you wouldn't normally get off the system inside the car. If you want more info on how to do that, Renew Edition 158, and I've also put that same article at EV Choice. Few things to watch out for. If you've got an old switchboard, you might actually be triggering upgrading the switchboard. Can Renew magazine. If you have somewhere to charge off street, that can be a little trickier. I have written some articles on those things, and there's a number of reports out and around. Select electricity tariffs. If you have a high daytime rate, shoulder off-peak and peak rates, try not to charge during the peak rate. It could be expensive. Off-peak is a lot better. Choice of EVSEs themselves. They have everything from the simplest one that I've got on a wall in that picture there down or up to things that are all singing, all dancing. You can actually check by your app on your phone what it's doing. You may need, as I said, that BYO lead, and that portable one is really good if you're going a little off the beaten track. I've also popped those articles up on my website. There will also be the dates coming up. As I said, some countries have already set dates when they will end sales of internal combustion engine cars, and the manufacturers have seen the writing on the wall. And this list I keep updating every time I do a presentation. I have to add another one or two. Not quite sure what Mazda, Mitsubishi and Nissan will be selling in 2050, because most countries in the world will have stopped selling 10, 15, 20 years. Norway set 2025. They're at 90% plug-in electric vehicle sales already. More information, Renew magazine and Renew organisation. I had that how to check in a second-hand vehicle was in a couple of months ago, a couple of editions ago. The one that just came out, if vehicles coming in the next 6 to 12 months, and a little bit of a bit further look at what we might be seeing. Australian Electric Vehicle Association is always good for looking for those fact sheets, as well as what's coming up in some events around the place, and there's a discussion forum. You don't have to join the AVA for the discussion forum, and you can ask questions there. Find out more, The Driven, that's what I write for, EV Council. They're the representing the big end of town, but they have some really good fact sheets and reports, and my own website. As I said, you can pop in there for grabbing some of these articles. There's also the All Energy conference tomorrow and Thursday, and they have a really big EV stream, so pop along there if you want to hear some more about that. Just pop in and have a look at the website if you want to see what they're running. That's it from me. My EV news at Big Pond website. You can email me for the presentation. I'll send a copy, or I think the lovely people at Yarra will send them out to you as well. I'm not sure how it's being organised, but I'll shut up now, stop sharing, and let Mel pick up the questions.
Thanks very much, Bryce. A lot of information packed into there. That was really fascinating to hear about. So I'll ask some questions now. So the first question, excuse me. To date, it seems that most EVs are either sedans or hatchbacks, but I see in the news that the first electric ute has come onto the market. When will there be the same or similar models as petrol cars available? And when do you think that there will be price parity?
It's two questions there, so I'll start with the EV utes. As I said early in the piece, in the presentation, when you look back at a transition, it seems really quick. When you're in the middle of one, it seems really slow. So the utes have been coming. We've known they're around. There's about 5 or 6 available overseas. The Ford F-150 Lightning won't be coming here anytime soon. They are so oversubscribed for that one. They thought they would build production capacity for about 40,000 a year. By the time they got to 80,000 orders, they thought they better up the production rate a bit. So they had to expand the factory. When they hit 200,000 orders, they stopped taking orders, and only recently reopened that, trying to double the production again. The Ford Mark E Mustang, they've had so many orders, they're now trying to triple production. So it's that transition period. So there are a number of others. Hummer has actually been reborn as an EV brand and does dual cab utes, Chevy Silverado. So there's a number of them in America. BYD are talking about bringing one here next year. GWM, all of these, those three of those for the GWM, BYD, and the other one, which I just forgot, GWM, are all Chinese, and they are likely to be here in the next 12 months or so. The Rivian, which is an American one, is the true off-road one. That's likely to be here maybe 2024 at the earliest. Was supposed to be here earlier than that, but due to, again, oversubscribed, they can't build them fast enough. And they're also going to go to Europe first now rather than Australia, which they had promised to be Australia first. As for price parity, that's been predicted for quite some time. It was started at 2027 and it keeps working backwards, 26, 25. They got to 2024, and then because of that ramping up and battery suppliers, mines for lithium, haven't expanded quite as fast as they were thinking. So the battery price, which is expected to hit $100 per US dollars per kilowatt hour, and that's the price parity point. They got down to $110 early this year, so they're getting very close, and they started going up again. So it's about 120-ish at the moment. That $100 point is it. So we're getting close, maybe 24, 25. The sub $40,000 cars will start arriving next year is the prediction.
Fantastic. Thanks. That's a heap of information, and great to know there's so much happening with different types of cars, and that price parity is, it sounds like it's very close. And then of course we've got the Victorian government subsidy to help bridge that gap.
Yeah, when you get to sub 40,000 and take 3 off that, you're getting close to 10% off. 7.5%.
Andrew asks, if someone trips on my cable, who has the liability?
I'm not even going to attempt to answer that question. It'd be if it's your household, then it's your household insurance policy. You shouldn't have leads across the footpath. So the short answer is don't run a lead across the footpath. The other thing is there's a thing called curb charge. If you look that up on the web, that's actually being trialled now in Port Phillip Council, and they actually will put a pop-up charger in the median strip in front of your house if you don't have off-street parking, and you can lift it up, plug in, so you don't have a lead to trip over on the footpath. And the first one went in last week. I'm going to write that up for the Driven in the next week or so when I get a chance. And there's more of them going in soon. So that's one option that's being trialled in Port Phillip, and several of the inner councils are looking at that. There are on-street parking type situations that are being explored by councils. Yarra yourselves are. And we're actually, as part of a bigger consulting group, we've actually picked up a contract with some of the Sydney councils to look at dedicated AC street charging and how best to do it.
Yeah, great, thanks. So we have another question. I'm interested in a vehicle charger that I can use so that I can use my car as a home battery. Is this technology available, or what are your thoughts on when this technology will be available?
I might actually share my screen again. I knew I was going to get this question. I knew I shouldn't have taken the slide out. So I'll.
Fantastic! You got your answer prepared.
Yes, so I had prepared. Here's one I prepared earlier. Share that, and I shall pop this up. Bidirectional charging is what you're asking about, and there's 3 layers to it. Vehicle to load, where you can plug a 3-pin plug into an adapter and then plugs into the charging port, and you'll get power out. And a number of cars are starting to do that now. The Ioniq 5 will give you 15 amps. I think the BYD will give you 10 amps. They're slowly evolving that. After that will come vehicle to home, which is basically providing power to the home from behind the meter, so it's not pushing it out to the grid like your solar panels will. That's effectively, if you have a power blackout, your car will power your home. And then there's the vehicle to grid option, where the car battery can actually be used as a grid stabilization, and they will offer tariffs to say, if you plug your car in at this time, we'll pay you to soak up some power, or pay you to put out maybe 10 or 20% of your charge 10 or 20 times a year. in order to stabilise the grid on a really hot summer's afternoon when everybody turned their air conditioner on. Vehicle to X, V2X is the general term. The old Leafs and IMEVs did do it, but they lost the plug ball. CCS, which is that lower one, which is what everybody has except Nissan Leaf, which is also switching to the CCS with their next ARIA vehicle. But the CCS system is being developed, and it'll be 2025 when they have the full V2X, all vehicle to load, vehicle to home, vehicle to grid. I'll get unshare on that. So hopefully that answers the question. So 2025, 26, you'll be able to buy it, and it'll probably be, I guess, $3,000 or $4,000 to install the system. For a CHAdeMO system, you can get one, but they're $10,000 to install plus installation, and it's still only in trials.
Great, thanks for that really comprehensive answer. We have another question. This question's for Kat. We don't have room for a charger at home. We don't have a garage, and we can't run a lead from the house to the car on the street. So how can we advocate to the state government for better and more chargers?
Thanks, Mel. I've also got my camera working now. So, well, that's a great question. I'm running the Zero Emissions Vehicles Subsidy program, but I would recommend that that's something that we can give you some information on, but definitely Victorian Government is for Climate Change. And parts of DELP are also Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning are also looking into this. So definitely something to write in about, but Mel, I might have to give you where to write in about after this session.
Great, thanks, Kat. The next question is, can my regular mechanic service an EV?
Yes and no. I'll quickly answer that one. There is a new training package qualification for apprentice EV mechanics that came out in February this year. All the TAFEs are now madly scrambling to tool up for it. So probably next year there will start being apprentice EV mechanics coming out. At the moment, your local mechanic can't because they just haven't done the training. There'll be skill sets being put out for those mechanics, so they'll start picking it up as well as the apprentices. So in a couple of years' time, there will be a number able to do it. At the moment, you're generally looking at people who are sort of early adopter type people and have been tinkering away with them and have a reasonable knowledge of them, but you're pretty much limited to the dealers for the moment. It's just the early stages of the technology.
Thanks, Bryce. There's a question about the lifespan of a battery. How long is the lifespan of the battery in an EV, and is there much variation between the different models?
That's a very good question. Often get asked that one. Batteries have a battery guarantee of about 8 years, 70% of their range. So if you have a 500k range battery, lose 30%, that's 150. You still got 350, and that's worst case scenario. If you lose any more than that within the time, you get a new battery anyway for free. They're finding the Teslas are losing 1 or 2% a year. So after 10 years, you might have lost, what was that? 10 to 20%. So say 15. So that's that 500-600k range on a Tesla. You're looking at 450 probably left. So a lot of people wouldn't even notice. So Tesla say the batteries will last pretty much the life of the car. BMW are saying the same thing. Nissan said recently that of all the batteries they put in their cars, most of them are still in the cars. They expected them to be coming out and being recycled or repurposed a lot earlier. So they were surprised that that's been happening. So they don't die after the end of the 8-year warranty. They keep going. They're likely to have pretty good ranges and capacities left. If you really need to change them, the original Leaf battery cost something horrendous like $30,000 to replace when they were new, but nobody did pay that because they were replaced under warranty if they failed. They cost about $10,000 to replace now. The IMEV was similar-ish, but you can actually get, there's a company up in Queensland that is actually putting out an aftermarket battery refurbishment that will double the range of the IMEV, and it's about $13,000 fitted.
Wow, yeah, that's really really interesting to hear that about the different options, and interesting to hear that even after it's lost some of its range, it's still, in many cases it can still continue working without affecting it too much.
Oh, I also forgot to add that they don't then go straight into recycling. They actually go into another nice gentle life as storage battery systems, so they can be repurposed. A number of the big manufacturers are actually trialing systems where they'll have megawatts of spare capacity, and they've got new batteries sitting there, so they've got warranty replacements in future, and they've got old batteries, and they've got maybe another 10 years of life in there before they eventually go to recycling, and they're 90-something% recyclable.
Fantastic. A question from Tam: is it wise to use the car as a home battery? Does that affect its lifespan, I think? And if so, what is the minimum charge that the battery should be able to go down to?
Listen for their vehicle to grid type stuff, warranty the battery to be used with the vehicle to grid. So I'm guessing that the other manufacturers will do the same. The key point there is it's not like hard driving when you're accelerating and decelerating, so you're pushing the battery quite hard. They're very gentle charge, discharge, so it's not that hard on the battery. Yes, it does reduce the number of cycles. All batteries have a particular number of cycles they're built to do, so maybe 3,000 or 5,000, depending on the brand. You can do the math of how many times that would be once a week for the number of cycles that they can do. Generally speaking, you try to operate an EV between 20 and 80% for your day-to-day stuff. It's like a fuel tank. You don't run it below quarter. Most people don't completely fill up their tank when they refill, unless it happens to be really cheap. So 10, 20% up to 80% is a nice number. If I'm going for a long trip, I'll take it up to 100 the night before, and then I charge up to 80% at each of the DC charges along the way. And then I'll do 100 at the end if I'm going somewhere. Otherwise, I'll just keep it at 80 until I leave again. And occasionally, you might run it down to 5%. I've run Waikona down to 37-kilometre range. It doesn't hurt it if you do that occasionally. It's obviously not good for it if you kept doing it all the time, but it's, as I said, between 20 and 80%. It's a nice number to keep it to.
Thanks, Bryce. And that's a good lead into the next question, which is about your trip from Melbourne to Perth. You mentioned that you traveled from Melbourne to Perth in an EV. Does it take a lot of planning to do a long trip like that?
A little bit. Plug Share is your friend for that. So you find the chargers. Melbourne to Adelaide is really easy. You just stop at the DC charger. I generally only stopped every second or third charger. And I would put basically morning tea, lunch, afternoon tea. I sort of try and plan to be at the chargers at those rough times. In fact, when I left, I did Melbourne to Horsham the first day. So just left at lunch, got there, did fast charges through to Adelaide because I wanted to do a bit of get through to Port Augusta. So I thought Horsham to Port Augusta was a nice number to do, which is easy with DC fast chargers. After Adelaide, there are no fast chargers. They showed on that picture. So after Port Augusta, you plug into caravan parks and you get pretty much a full charge overnight. So you get your 100%, stop at the Poochera pub, 3 hours, get to Ceduna. Then you spend 3 days effectively across that 1,400-kilometre gap, which in a petrol car you might then do in 2. And then you got a couple of DC charges up till a couple of 100k short of Norseman, and then it's another day and a half because there's no DC. So I added probably a day and a half to the trip over a petrol car.
Fantastic. It's really interesting to hear about a trip of that distance. I think it's not often that a lot of people have heard about traveling that far in that kind of an environment in an EV, and I think it's really fantastic to hear how you've done it and how it's possible.
Actually, another example is when the bushfires in New South Wales in 2019, I was actually in Coffs Harbour. I'm just driven up via Sydney for a conference and visited some friends up there. I just headed out of Coffs Harbour, saw the smoke on the horizon, listened to the radio, went, that doesn't sound good. Got our trusty Plug Share again. Oh yeah, there's one at Tamworth, DC charger, NRMA Dubbo. Nice line from Dubbo back to Melbourne. I was Coffs Harbour to Melbourne in 2 days.
Wow, that's really impressive. That's amazing. Thank you so much. I'll leave it there for the questions. We're right about up to the end of our session tonight. Sam, if you wouldn't mind sharing the last screen that has the links for further information, I'll just talk through a bit of that. But first, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us tonight, and a big thank you to our presenters. It was really great to hear all about the zero emissions vehicle subsidy and about driving and owning an EV and what's happening in the EV transition. If you have a question that hasn't been answered, please get in touch with Solar Victoria or Yarra City Council, or you can have a look at Bryce's website at EV Choice to see all of the information that he has been talking about tonight. Now or in a couple of minutes, you'll have an email in your inbox with the links that have been shared on the screen, as well as a quick survey. So we'd love to have your feedback on this session. So for more information, please check out Solar Victoria's Zero Emissions Vehicle Subsidy page to find out more about the subsidy. Visit our solar powered electric homes survey if you'd like to complete the survey and go in the draw to win one of 2 $100 vouchers to Street. You can learn about creating an all-electric home in the city of Yarra and watch our past event recordings at yarracity.vic.gov.au/all-electric-home. And you can contact the Yarra Energy Foundation if you'd like to book a free 30-minute phone energy consult with Renew, and there's a limited number of those remaining. We have a couple of upcoming events that I'd like to share. So Darebin Climate Action Now is partnering with Good Car Company on a secondhand EV bulk buy. And this is going to be launched at an event called the EV Show and Shine on the 6th of November in Bundoora. So if you visit the link, which you'll also see in your inbox, you can see if you visit that link there, you'll see the events that I'm mentioning now, and you can sign up to come along to that event. And we've also got a couple of sustainable building tours, one at Cremorne Studios and one at North Fitzroy Library and Community Hub, if you'd like to see some examples of sustainable buildings. So thanks so much to everyone for coming along tonight. Have a great evening, and we hope to see you again soon.